So we're learning Manach Chochem, and now we are on page Tzadik Zayin. Inyan Hali'umiyut, the idea of nationalism. Let's see how Reb Yoel deals with this idea and the accusation that Chabad are supporters of nationalism. Yadua u'mefursim, mashakosuf bekama svarim, oid marishonim. It's known and publicized, what's written in many svarim, yet from the Rishonim, shebnei Yisrael heim sug acher mishar bnei Adam. That the Jewish nation, the people of Yidden, the Yidden, Am Yisrael, we are a different category amongst all other humans. I heard this type of idea from Rabbi Yoel myself many times. So I'm very familiar with this idea, and here he puts it in writing. It's not just that we are smart, we have long noses, short noses, our DNA is this way. No. It begins with something else. The early Rishonim say we are what we call in Hebrew sug acher. Avram, sug acher means a different category. The noses and the DNA and the smarts and all of those things are ancillary and a derivative of sug acher. They don't make the sug acher, our being, a separate qualitative category. Okay? The Kamoi and the Rishonim explain it this way. The just as creation is divided into four categories: Doimim, the inanimate; Sameach, the vegetative; Chai, the living; Medaber, the speaking. And the difference between the domain of the living and the domain of the speaking. It's not only that they are different types, just as the differences between the types of a shur, an ox, chamor, a donkey, ari, a lion, etc., within the category of the living itself, it's not that way. Kiyim, rather, shehusug acher. It's a completely different category. In the category of chai, of the living, there's a different type of soul, of nefesh, than there is in the type of soul that there is in tzomeach and the vegetative. So too, and more so, is the difference between the Yidden and the non-Jews, lahavdil. Shem sug acher legamri, they are of a complete different category. V'hu shebnei Yisrael yesh nefesh acheres she'ein b'shar bnei Adam. What is the difference? That there is within a Jew a different soul that does not exist in other human beings. Velvel, we're on page Tzadik Zayin, end of the first paragraph. Vihi nefesh alikis. What is this nefesh that we're talking about? This is from Tanya, chapter 2, and that is the godly soul, nefesh alikis. Asher hi beloshin admur azokim b'Tanya reish perik beis, it, the nefesh alikis, as the Alter Rebbe cites in the beginning of chapter 2 of Tanya, quote, chelik elikam imal mamash, a part of God, of actual God, of godliness, and that does not exist in a non-Jew. I'm not going to now go into explanations. I'm just going to read what it says. V'yaseirim mizu, and more so, paragraph 2. Hagam shagam b'nei Hagam, although shagam b'nei Yisrael, even by Yidden, yesh shtei nefoshes, there are two souls, nefesh elikiyas and nefesh chiyunis, the godly soul and the vivifying soul. Hine, Aleph, Iker Muhusai, the primary essence, v'chayusai, and vitality, shel ish ha-Yisraeli, of a Jew, who nefesh elikis shaboy. It is the nefesh elikis. V'hainu, this means, shachayis ha-bachayis gufay hagashmi. What chayis sustains the physical body of a Jew, but poyel mamish, in actuality, he be'ikar, the word ikar is in bold, it's primarily menafesh elikis, coming from his godly soul. V'rak, and only, shezeh nimshach, the way it manifests itself, the way it reveals itself in the body, al yidei his lapshus b'nefesh achiyunis, it's by the nefesh elikis investing itself and going through the nefesh habahamis. But ikar hachayis, the primary chayis of the nefesh of a Jew, is the nefesh elokis. Okay, this is a very important nakuda. What he's saying here is that, and this is explained in Chassidus, it's not just velvel that my neshama is godly, is from godliness and from a nefesh elikis, and my mitzvahs, but even my sleeping and my eating and all my gashmias is its essence. It's coming from the nefesh elikis as it's filtered through a nefesh habamis. That's basic Tanya, basic Chassidus. Let's go on. Beis, number 2. Gab nefesh achiyunis, also the vivifying soul, the nefesh habami, should be Yisrael within a yid. He p'chines nailis yoiser min nefesh hachiyunis shebe'umas ha'olam. It also is greater than the vivifying soul that's within non-Jews, umas ha'olam. Kimevur betanya seif perek aleph ubekam makomis, as the Alter Rebbe says this at the end of chapter 1 and many other places. Gimel, number 3. Afilu haguf hagashmi shel Yisraeli. Okay? What were we talking about until now? The nefesh. Now the Rabbi Yo is saying that even the physical body of a yid that appears to be like non-Jews. We have the same nose, the same eyes, and the same stomach, and the same body build as a non-Jew. So what's the difference between the two? Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, this comparison is only external. In the inside, the pnimius, gam haguf shel ish Yisrael, hu guf kodesh. The body of a Jew is holy. This is chapter 48, 49 in Tanya. That although outwardly nidma b'chomer yusai, it appears there's no difference, and of course the argument by many is, so why can't I marry Lahavdil, a non-Jew? She has eyes, I have eyes, on and on. What's the difference? I marry a Jew, the same eyes, the same stomach, the same hair color. Well, what's the difference? The answer is, the pnimius is different, the essence is different. That's not something that you create. It's something that God gave to you, either as a proper convert or born to a Jewish mother, and that's who you are. So it's not something that the argument, with the rational argument is, what's the difference? We look alike. The answer is, you're right, outwardly you look alike. But inwardly, God gives a Jew something different than a non-Jew. And therefore, we and Jews and non-Jews are two different elements of creation. Not that one is better than the other, that's not the point. And Hashem says, for Jews to stay with Jews and non-Jews stay with non-Jews when it comes to marriage, just an example. But going back to the point over here, as explained, this last idea at very great length in many places in Chabad Chassidus. Third paragraph. Hashkofa zu. This hashkofa, this view, this was a given by all Jews. Kimuvim, she'elu shezoku lilmud teres Chassidus, those that merited to learn Chassidus, ubefrat Chassidus Chabad, and especially not just general Chassidus, but Chabad Chassidus, hoisa etzlam hashkafa zu, they had this view, this hashkafa, bibihirus, with clarity, yoisa, with more clarity. Aval gam stam Yehudim, even ordinary Jews, vafilu Yehudim pshutim, and even simple Jews, even though they didn't understand the Gimel Dvarim now, the three aforementioned points that I made, they had no idea about this. They have no idea. They're not so in tune with this thinking. Nevertheless, it was self-understood as a given by them in a very matter-of-fact way that within the human category itself, the Jews are very different category than non-Jews. And what separates Jews from non-Jews? It's a godly idea. And this godly consciousness is the true essence of every Jew. So Rabbi Yoel is saying, Avram, that you don't have to be a Harvard scholar or a Bnei Brak Yeshiva Panovich scholar to know that a Jew is different than a non-Jew. And even if you didn't learn Chassidus and you didn't learn Chabad Chassidus, everyone knows. I have to tell you, what do they say? Hey, you guys are a light onto the nation. A lot of the Christians and all that, the chosen nation, right? Everyone knows there's something different about Jews. That's what he's saying. Next paragraph. And this very matter of fact, Hanocha means foundation, idea. That was a matter of fact, a given fact by Jews. In addition to the importance of the very fact, which is a foundation in Judaism. In addition to this, this fact, it caused a greater awareness and a greater arousal by Jews when they learned Torah and they did mitzvahs. For every Jew knew, as a matter of fact, that since his very core essence is his godly soul, his entire desire was to bind oneself with God. Next page. Page Tzadik Ches. More and more. In other words, the more a person became cognizant of the fact that this is my reality, the godliness, nefesh elikiz, the more the person wanted to learn and daven. Because in learning and in davening, that is the abode, the domain where you find God. So if I know that Moshe is driving and Avi is driving and Isser is driving, right? And if you know that you sitting in your car now are there because God has animated you, the nefesh elikiz, because you're a Jew. Because right now you have on the road, I'm sure, non-Jews driving as well, right? I don't know if we should say nebuch, but that's the fact. So, and nevertheless, you're driving, they're driving. Your driving is different than their driving. Why? Because you're a Yid. And we knew this, Rabbi Yoel says, as it was a matter of fact and given by Jews for thousands of years. What does that do? That when you come to an opportunity to do Torah mitzvahs, you do it with more energy, because that is the domain that supports godliness. So if you know you are a piece of godliness, so when you have an opportunity to express more of that godliness, It animates you more. That's what he says. We're on top of page Tzadik Ches, those that joined us now. Let's continue. The whole mitzvah sheyehudi osa, first line. Every mitzvah that a Jew does, mekasher oisa yosef HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it binds him with God. You hear that? You hear that, Avi? Every mitzvah. You're not doing many mitzvahs, a person. He does one mitzvah, he's connected. A second mitzvah is connected. He might go into McDonald's and buy a few minutes later a cheeseburger, Rachmana litzlan. That's a separate score. That's a separate issue. The fact is, he put on tefillin. And the Aveda that he did a moment later, knowing or not knowing, doesn't wipe away the mitzvah. So every mitzvah is independent of anything else. And therefore, when we experience a mitzvah, which is a godly experience, this enhances and this manifests who we are. So in other words, the Jew that's eating at McDonald's is not the Jew. He is a Jew, but that's not where he manifests his Judaism, his Elokis. Where is his Elokis manifested? When he puts on tefillin, when he does a mitzvah, when he helps another person. Let's continue. And he says, in Chassidus Chabad, it quotes this idea almost every page, that the word mitzvah, which literally means like a commandment, really means meloshen tzavta v'chibur. It comes from the Aramaic word connection, kesher. It binds you, right? It's a binding. When we do something that God says we should do, i.e. a mitzvah, we are bound to God. That's really what's happening. In other words, that godliness that we have inside ourselves, as he explained on the page before, that we are of a different category than the non-Jews, it's expressed when we do a mitzvah. When we don't do a mitzvah, it's hidden. It's not seen. Manas Friedman always, I remember years ago, he would say, you know why there's anti-Semitism? Because they see a Jew, and they know a Jew is supposed to be a Jew, and if the Jew is acting like a non-Jew, they say, you must have something up your sleeve. And therefore I hate you, because you want to kill me. And and it's not just his saying, I experienced it in Marin County. The whole issue I had with Chabadas was xenophobia, was a fear of the unknown. They never saw these Martians wearing beards and black frocks and hats when it's 95 degrees on a July afternoon. And here are a few clowns walking around like they're, 100 years before. So they said, of course, you guys are troublemakers. It's a cult. You guys are up to something, just like the Jim Jones cult or another cult that the FBI had to bust. Our neighbors thought we're a cult. And I don't mean just, Chabad. I mean the Orthodox Jew who walks around on Shabbos dressed like a Yid. Whether he's wearing a jacket, even if Eretz Yisrael, you're not wearing a jacket, you're wearing, a shirt and pants, but you dress differently, nicely. What's going on? You're going to a funeral? What are you doing? It's 9 o'clock in the morning, Shabbos morning. You dress like you're going to a funeral. So in other words, that's where suspicion comes, xenophobia. What I'm saying is that when a Yid is Elokis, that's a Jew, Elokis. When a Yid is in the arena of Yiddishkeit, Torah mitzvahs, it's expressed. When the Yid is not, and especially if the Yid doesn't act that way, then it's not expressed, but it's still there. It's dormant, it's covered, but it's always there. And I like we've had discussions, and always brought up that idea way back with a certain Jew that's a Jew hater and all that. And my answer was, he's still a Jew. He's taka maybe a hater, and he's taka, going to get a real, he's going to get what he deserves to get and everything else, but he's still a Jew. And what do we have to do? We have to pray that he don't do tshuva. We have to be mispalel that he do tshuva. Not that he died, he dropped dead now. No. That's what, frankly, some of the people that we're reading about here argue. And that's what I hear in the streets here sometimes, unfortunately. That is not the way Chabad and Chassidus and Baal Shem Tov really teach us. That even someone who opposes you, and even someone who is wrong, you have to daven for them to do tshuva. Not daven they should die. That's not a Yiddish zach. You know, we grew up with so much anti-Semitism in Poland and in Russia, so I understand where my ancestors and the community comes from and their feelings. Like I told you, I myself was mugged at 9, 10 years old, you know, by people, and I walked around with a kind of a hatred, and it's wrong. The fact that there was 1 or 2 bad apples or more doesn't make a whole group of people wrong. And I'm saying that not as a, you know, as a liberal. I'm not liberal at all, as you guys know. I'm not liberal. But this is the emes. The emes is you have to discern between what's evil and what's not evil. And the Rebbe, and you can see it on the videos of some people coming by the Rebbe. I remember there's a video where a chassid comes by and he starts cursing like certain goyim. And the Rebbe says, what do you have to curse them for? What do you have to curse them? Say to Hillel they should do tshuva. It's on a video. You see the whole mahalach, the whole approach. And that's what Rabbi Yoel is espousing over here. Let's continue now to the next paragraph. Uba Zionis comes along Zionism, Zionis, second paragraph. And they desire to uproot, God forbid, Hoyelesia, Mibnei Yisrael Hashkofa now, they seek to uproot this Hashkofa, this view. Ayedei Shatziyonim Heitifu Hashkim Vahare Veshitas Alumiyus. By them, the Tziyonim, dripping, meaning dripping night, morning, and evening, their shita of nationalism. In other words, by them pouring into the community and kind of forcing the view of nationalism on Yidden, Asher Am Yisrael Hi Ummah, and what is their argument? Here it is, Avi. Asher Am Yisrael Hi Ummah Kishar Kol Ummas Lahavdil. That we Jews are a nation like any other nation, Lahavdil. Rabbi Yoel just finished for a page sharing with us what the true Torah belief is, that we're not like another nation. So he says, nationalism says just the opposite, that we're like any other nation. All Goyim are like Beis Yisrael, just like the Russian nation, or Am HaTzarfati, or the French nation, how do they become French? Through their piece of land, their country, through their language. The word in Yiddish is birger, through living and being a ezrach, a dweller, shall medinas Russia, of the country Russia, umedaber svas Russia, and you speak the Russian language, in bold. This thing, living there and speaking their language, you become a Russian. And it makes no difference to what faith you belong. In other words, so you can be a South African, but if you live in Russia and you speak their language, not South African. So you're a Russian. You're a Russian and that's it. Right? The Rosh Hashanah is Hoya Lo Siya. Hey Yud Lamed Tuf is God forbid. Hoya Lo Tia. What the Lo Tia should not be. In other words, what they say, what they want to do of nationalism, uprooting the specialty of the Jewish people, Lo Tia should not be. So that's an expression that we use in general. Hoya Lo Tia. Let's continue. Al derech zeh. 1 second. So it makes no difference to what emunah you belong. Im l'das hanotzrus, whether you're a Christian, or l'das ha-Muslim members, or to Muslims, or you're totally secular, bereft of any religion. So too the Zionists argue regarding Jews, the inyan halumiyut, nationalism, ha'isvyashus be'eretz Yisrael, living in Eretz Yisrael, deeper svas ivrit, speaking Hebrew, hu ha'osa oisa le'Yehudi, that makes you a Jew. Vein nafkamina, there's no difference, klal, at all, imumayim belikei Yisrael, whether you believe in the Jewish God, or love, or not necessarily, or ikeru, the primary thing is, amru ha-Zionim, so argue the Zionists, Zionim, shehu li'umi, that you are belong to the nation, nationalism. Vayidei zehu Yehudi, and that's how Yehudi. They say, no harabim, next paragraph, Maisa Sotan Etzliach. Rabbi Yoel says, due to our sins, that's a common expression used, Maisa Sotan Etzliach, the act of the Satan succeeded. V'hanochazu, and this of you, shall shita alumius, of the shita of nationalism. 1. Thousands of Jews accepted it, asher inyan muhusay shel Yehudi, meaning that the essence of a Jew, the inyan ha'искashus of Kodesh Baruch Hu, aydei Torah mitzvahs, and the way you bind yourself to God and Torah mitzvahs, hein shnei inyanim shonim. It's two separate things. In other words, when on the street, be like the street. When in shul, be like a shul. And until this premise was accepted, the next word is Ba'avoseinu Horabim. That's the acronym, the Rosh Hashanah. Ba'avoseinu Horabim. With it's like the first two words of this beginning of this paragraph. Avoseinu Horabim. So due to our multitude of sins, it's been accepted by groups and organizations, Orthodox ones, and also partially by some of the Aguda. They said, the cost was Zebefedish, and they wrote this clearly, even in their papers, even in the papers of the Aguda. They wrote that although you have to believe in the Jewish God, mitzvahs, and keep Torah mitzvahs, nevertheless, you can be a Jew without this. And even the secular one, the free one. And even the complete kofer, who Yehudi Shalem, he's a complete Jew. And he's not missing anything in his Judaism. And this is comparable to Rusi, to the Russian She'odok Pedas Hanatzrus, who is attached to the Christian religion. Even someone who is denies the Christian religion, who Rusi Gomor, is a complete Russian. So nationalism argues the same thing with a Jew. You can deny Judaism, you can deny Torah, and you're still belong to the Jewish people. Now, you got to listen to the whole thing. The Shita zu shel ha-Mizrachim v'Agudim, and this Shita of the Mizrachim and the Agudim, shehi kfira gmura b'musik Yehudi, which is complete denial, kfira, in from the perspective of a real Yid. The Yehudi who's the Chazal say in Megillah, who is a Jew? Misha kefer b'avodah zarah, someone who denies avodah zarah, u'maydin agrees b'chol ha-Torah kula, to everything the Torah. And this does not exist by someone who's nationalistic. He doesn't have this basic component of Chazal that he denies in Avodah Zarah, and he agrees to everything in Torah. They expounded on this. They brought a raya from what the Chazal say in the Gemara. Yisrael, Afal Pishachota Yisraelu. This is called reverse psychology, right? The Babak says everyone's a Yid. So what did the nationalists say? They said the same thing. You don't need Torah, you don't need mitzvahs. He's a Jew, even though he sinned, he belongs to the Jewish nation. We're talking about, of course he's a Jew. We know he's a Jew, but in other words, they're saying you don't need anything more. We're going to stop here. Tomorrow we'll continue. Any questions or comments from anybody? So quiet today, huh? We didn't verbring. No one else.
When Rav Yoel's writing, when he says the concept of leumiyut, if I'm pronouncing it, nationality, he's speaking specifically. I'm asking. He's speaking specifically about like Medinat Yisrael. I mean, the idea
Yes.
Secular government.
Yeah, Medinat Yisrael. But Moshe, even before Medinat Yisrael, this idea was already planted by Herzl and company. He
says
what?
He says
What? He said.
In his word, he mentions. He talks about Zionism.
Right.
He's not trying to kind of glaze it over. He's not trying. He's saying it openly. Right?
Absolutely. He's saying what frum Jews are saying, basically, that nationalism, I'm just saying to Moshe, it's that it didn't begin in 1948. In 1948, it became public. It began way before. Look, the Rebbe Marash, it's in Hayoim Yoim, Moshe, said if they would, in the beginning 1800s, 1880, 1881, when the pogroms started in Russia, and there was mass, aliyah and all that. The Rebbe Marash, the fourth Rebbe, Reb Shmuel, said, I would have joined and brought 50,000 Russian Jews with me. But they left out one word. They said, Bilu, right? It was called the movement of Bilu. L'chu v'neilcha, but they left out Bebeis Hashem in their acronym. In other words, they left out two words. That I can't support. And by the way, you all know probably that many Rabbonim and some even Rebbes supported it. But the Rebbe Marash said no. Yes, Moshe.
So that's actually my question. I wanted to ask that question. It's a little bit of it's related, but you had that's exactly what you said. There were certain Rebbes, there's certain Rebbes and Rabbanim who supported it. Like, for example, I don't know like this Rav Reinus, for example. There were different Rabbanim, Rebbeim in Europe who supported. So I'm just, it gets, to me, it gets a little gray, like what they supported, what they didn't support.
Look,
I guess
I can't tell you. I can just make a general statement. So, if you really want to get into it, like Avi said, he did a lot of reading on it. You have to do a lot of reading, and you have to see what from them themselves what their shita and their writing says. But basically, of course, they believed in Torah mitzvahs, but not Torah mitzvahs, that should be the way the country should be. But they didn't put their foot down, no. And the Rebbe Marash is saying, I'm putting my foot down until you include this as the essence of your aliyah, I ain't joining. So that you could say that was a difference in Shita, where maybe Rav Reinus and others trusted the people, And I mean, I remember reading a cousin of the Rebbe Rashab, Ashnader Schneerson, he did side with the aliyah movement. And I remember that Rashab wrote to him and said, my high. And he said he checked it out and he was convinced that they're going to do Bebeis Hashem. This was a very, very interesting period in our history, 1880 and on. You could kind of time it as that was the breaking point where secularism really and Haskalah really took off because the pogroms made such an upheaval, and it was a rebellion. You talk about the 60s. To me, that was like the 60s of the previous century, and was the 1880, 81. That was like our 60s. I don't know, it just fell into my head, this idea. I think that's the way I see it. And so people were going all over. It was chaos, killing, destruction. And it was easy to latch on to something. I mean, I found and I documented they bought property in Hadera, in Rabbanim. In other words, there was a very strong belief that this will be a country that will be Shmiras Mitzvahs. So that's where they would come from. Chevra, I would love to speak, but I do have now another shiur. I'll talk to you tomorrow, everyone. Moshe, good to see you back. Moshe, good to see you back.
Great to see you too. B'ezrat Hashem.
We want to see your holy face more often. It's still in the week of Shlomo Carlebach. Holy, 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 Gewalt. I got an email this morning from Emuna Witt. Amazing. I hope you guys saw that first interview. It's going to be the next one tomorrow, Mr. Shem. I'm releasing the second one. So he speaks about this Emuna Witt. It's amazing. She wrote me it's amazing what's going on. Baruch Hashem. So you're a holy guy. Zionism. Bye-bye.
Sure.
Take care.